I will take the name Mexican enemies have given me. The whites will learn it, and you will learn it.
Jay Silverheels made history as the first Native American to play a Native character on TV. He became famous as Tonto in The Lone Ranger. But behind the scenes, something was very wrong. In 1957, when someone asked him about his most famous role, he said just 3 words. Tonto is stupid. That wasn't the only secret. He was paid half of what his white co-star earned. A director once tried to physically attack him on set, and the name Tonto itself meant something he could never escape. Today, we're uncovering what really happened to the man who smiled on camera but suffered in silence. Jay Silverheels was born Harold J. Smith on May 26, 1912, on the Six Nations of the Grand River Reserve near Hagersville, Ontario. He came from a large Mohawk family, one of at least 10 kids crammed into a small house. His father, Alexander George Edwin Smith, was a Congo War hero who earned the Military Cross in World War I for bravery at the S&ERA. But after the war, he came home damaged, deafened by artillery, stuck on a farm, and surviving on just $49 a month from a Canadian government. His war medals didn't feed the family. His injuries never went away. Harold saw him suffer headaches and hearing loss every day. His mother, Mabel, was part Mohawk, part Seneca, and carried the weight of keeping the house running. She used traditional medicine because doctors wouldn't see them. They couldn't afford much, and what little they had came from the land, trade, or herbal knowledge. Poverty wrapped around their lives from the start. By age 5, Harold was already showing signs of athletic talent, racing around in local lacrosse matches on the reserve. By 19, he was playing box lacrosse professionally for the Toronto Tumps under the name Harry Smith. He didn't go alone. His cousins and brothers, Porky, Beef, and Chubby, were right there with him, traveling through Buffalo, Rochester, Atlantic City, and beyond. They played nearly non-stop through the 1930s, earning money, dodging poverty, and building a name. That name became Silverheels, given to Harold after he sprinted past a defender, so quickly it looked like his shoes flashed silver. It stuck. Newspapers picked it up. Fans showed up just to see him run. One season, he scored more than 4 goals a game, and coaches started assigning 2 men just to guard him. But athletic fame didn't mean freedom from the system. Harold grew up while Canada's residential schools tried to erase Indigenous languages. At Six Nations, students were beaten for speaking Mohawk. Some were fed soap or strapped. Harold's own sister was sent away to a residential school and came back unable to speak her own language properly. Families were torn apart by policies that banned ceremonies, punished their spirituality, and pushed them into silence. Officials called them lazy. They said they lacked the ability to compete. That message lingered not just in reports, but in everyday life, in how people looked at them, talked about them, treated them. When the Great Depression hit in the 1930s, Harold's family, like many others, sank deeper. They moved to Buffalo. Harold worked odd jobs, labored on farms, did whatever it took. His father, despite being a decorated veteran, could barely move without pain. His mother bartered away family heirlooms to get food. Government rations were often spoiled. Harold saw his parents give up everything just to keep the lights on. That kind of poverty didn't just hurt the stomach. It made people feel like they didn't exist. Still, Harold pushed forward. His speed on the lacrosse field opened doors. In 1932, he went pro and played for money, $75 per game, big cash, during the Depression. In one game in Montreal, a rough foul sparked a brawl, and Harold threw punches that got him suspended. But when he came back, ticket sales tripled. People wanted to see him, even if it meant controversy. He made headlines. He kept going. Then came boxing. Harold fought as a middleweight in the Golden Gloves tournament at Madison Square Garden. He made it to the semifinals before taking a brutal punch that broke his jaw in 2 places. The injury ended his boxing dreams, but the prize money kept him afloat. He lost nearly 25 pounds on a liquid diet, but he didn't quit. That fight taught him how to take pain and keep moving. In 1937, he toured Los Angeles with his lacrosse team. One day, while sprinting at Gilmore Stadium, comedian Joe E. Brown noticed him and offered a small film role. Harold performed a stunt, a diving catch that took 11 takes to get right. He was paid $150. That was twice what lacrosse paid. From there, things shifted. He got a Screen Actors Guild card, started calling himself Jay Silverheels, and by the end of the year, he'd appeared in 5 films. He wasn't a star, but he was in. Hollywood didn't roll out a red carpet. He worked as a stuntman, earning less than $20 a day and bus tables at night to survive, but in 1939, he landed a real role in Drums Along the Mohawk. It paid $350 a week, more than he'd ever made. Studios liked the name Silverheels. They told him to use it officially, said it sounded exotic. He took on small roles, mostly playing unnamed Indians. Casting directors made him strip to the waist like he was on display. They judged his body more than his acting. Still, he showed up, learned his lines, and kept getting work. In 1941, he finally had a speaking role. By then, he'd been in more than 15 films, usually uncredited, playing Indian Scout or Warrior No. 2. But he never gave up. He studied Shakespeare because a friend said, "If you can read this, you can read anything." He didn't think it was for him at first, but he learned. He served in World War II, though records are thin. In 1945, he returned to Hollywood with a new name, Jay Silverheels. But the industry hadn't changed. Native actors were still pushed aside for white actors in makeup. Roles were few, and the ones that existed were insulting. In 1946, he auditioned for Captain from Castile, starving himself so his suit would fit. The director made him take off his shirt like usual. It was humiliating, but he got the part. The film flopped financially, but he had a job. Still, he stayed uncredited even when he had lines. He traveled across the South with his lacrosse team, where racism was loud and inescapable. Hotels turned him away. Restaurants wouldn't serve him. He slept on buses while his white teammates got rooms. Once in Louisville, police threatened him just for using a bathroom marked whites only. These weren't rare events. They were constant. That's why later in life, when he finally had a platform in Hollywood, he used it to fight for better roles and representation. A decade passed before anyone really noticed him. That changed in 1948 when director John Huston cast him in Key Largo alongside Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Beale. Jay played Tom Osceola, a Seminole fugitive. Finally, a credited role in a major studio film. They shot it on the Warner Brothers back lot in Burbank for 78 days, building Florida, in a controlled environment to keep costs low. But for Jay, it meant climbing out of the shadows. No longer just another name lost in credits. 2 years later, in 1950, Jay was cast in Broken Arrow, a Western that claimed to be progressive but couldn't quite let go of old habits. He played Geronimo, a strong role but not the lead. That went to Jeff Chandler, a white actor from Brooklyn wearing dark makeup to portray Cochise. Even in a film that tried to present Native Americans more fairly, Hollywood couldn't bring itself to let Native actors lead. Real Apache people were hired as background extras from the Fort Apache Reservation. Jay, a Canadian Mohawk, gave Geronimo dignity, but the contradiction wasn't lost on anyone. Then came a moment that changed his life and TV history. In 1949, when The Lone Ranger came to ABC, Silvers beat out 35 other actors to become Tonto. It aired on September 15th. For the first time, a Native American played a Native American character on television. For 2 decades, the radio version of Tonto had been voiced by white men like John Todd and Roland Parker. Even when TV producers considered casting a Native actor, they hesitated. One was fired for refusing to speak in broken English. They went back to John Todd before finally giving Jay the job. At the time, Hollywood's standard was to paint Italian actors with Armenia Bowl red clay to make them look native enough. Jay's casting broke that mold. He wasn't supposed to win the part, but he did, and it changed everything. There was always a problem with the name. Tonto means fool or stupid in Spanish. Silverheels knew it. He lived with it. Publicly, he smiled. Privately, he resented it. In 1957, during a visit to his home reserve in Ontario, someone asked him about his famous role. His answer was quick. Tonto is stupid. That was all he said, just 3 words. But behind those words was a decade of quiet frustration. The name stuck through the decades, even as Native American groups pointed out its offensiveness. When Johnny Depp played Tonto in 2013, the controversy returned. Nothing had changed. And it wasn't just the name. Jay had a reputation for never reading his lines. Not because he was lazy, but because the lines were often bad, stiff, broken English written to sound authentic. So he'd ad-lib. He'd make it up. Me wait here. You go into town. That right. The phrases stuck. Directors were furious. Alan Dinhard remembered how one director, Wilhelm Thiele, went red with rage and had to be physically held back from attacking Jay on set in 1955. But Clayton Moore, the Lone Ranger himself, defended his co-star. Let it play, he'd say. It sounds more natural. Jay had a point. He knew how people really spoke, but Hollywood didn't want that. They wanted a stereotype, and he was forced to deliver it. Behind the scenes, things weren't much better. The budget for each episode was only $12,500, so corners were cut. Jay and Moore didn't even have proper dressing rooms in the beginning. They had to change clothes in a gas station restroom down the road. The heat on location was brutal, especially in Chadsworth, where the suede and wool costumes turned into ovens. Jay had enough. One day he refused to dress, just stood there waiting. Moore warned him that delaying the shoot could cost jobs, but Jay wouldn't budge. The next day, private dressing rooms appeared. It was a small win, but it meant something. Jay could have just accepted the fame. He was a star now. The Lone Ranger was one of the top shows on TV. It ranked number 7 in Nielsen ratings for the 1950 to 551 season and stayed in the top 30 for years. Over 8 seasons, they made 221 episodes. But Jay never forgot the cost. He didn't like what Tonto had become. He didn't like being the sidekick who always spoke in broken sentences. He was fluent, articulate, sharp. But the show didn't let him be that. Then came a scare that stopped the show cold. In 1955, during a fight scene rehearsal, a stuntman fell onto Jay. Moore saw something was off. Jay was walking strangely. He followed him to the trailer and found him clutching his chest. Heart attack. Despite being an athlete, a lacrosse champion, a Golden Gloves boxer, Jay was a heavy smoker.